Breaking news, the Miami Dolphins have officially traded Jaelan Phillips to the Philadelphia Eagles ahead of the NFL trade deadline on Tuesday. This is Dolphins Today. I am Nic Rohloff here breaking down the news, and this is the right decision for the Dolphins, and we'll explain why throughout this video and what could be next for Miami. But the former first-round pick who was on his fifth-year option, going to be an unrestricted free agent, has been dealt to the Eagles, giving Miami a third-round selection in the 2026 NFL Draft. And this is why you subscribe to the channel, because any breaking news, we will have you covered. We will also be live for the NFL trade deadline tomorrow, so subscribe and join the channel. Chris Grier fired Friday after the loss to the Ravens on Thursday Night Football. Champ Kelly is the interim GM, and we heard that there could be a fire sale in Miami, which should have been the case, by the way, even if Chris Grier was still in charge. But who knows, maybe Grier would not have done that to try to win more games this season and save his job, which probably would have been meaningless in the grand scheme of the franchise and in terms of saving his job as well. But we've seen Ian Rappaport, we've seen Adam Schefter talk about how Champ Kelly is going to likely be aggressive, but also look for right deals, trading players away, because if he wants to somehow secure the full-time, long job for the Dolphins GM position, well, you're going to have a successful trade deadline, because you're not really going to be able to showcase anything else other than maybe having a couple free, cheap signings in free agency or on the practice squad. So if Champ Kelly wants to impress Stephen Ross for the full-time job, which will be ultimately given out in January, he was going to have to make good and smart trades. And I think Jaelan Phillips for a third-round pick is a very smart trade. We've been talking about it for the past month. Phillips was never going to re-sign with the Miami Dolphins. It was just the unfortunate truth, if we're going to be real. Former first-round pick, has had Achilles surgery, has had ACL surgery in each of the last 2 seasons, respectively. And with a new regime coming in, whether it is a new GM and still Mike McDaniel, whether it is a new coach and a new GM coming in January, they didn't draft Phillips. They haven't coached Phillips. So they are not married to re-signing him. They do not have any incentive other than just diagnosing what has happened in the past on the field to ultimately make him a Miami Dolphin for the foreseeable future. So I always believed he was going to walk in NFL free agency. And I have said, if you can trade him for a day 2 selection in the draft, you do it without hesitation. Now, a lot of the projected trade value for Phillips has been a conditional 4th-round pick, has been maybe just a 4th-round pick. We've seen that on publications like ESPN, Bleacher Report. But I always said, if the edge rusher market on the trade deadline is heating up, it's robust, there's a ton of interest, but not a lot of teams trading the rumors, well, then guess what? Or trading edge rushers, you know what? Then this trade value for Jaelan Phillips might ultimately go up here, and you might be able to get a 3rd-round pick, which Miami does. So I think this is a tremendous deal for the interim GM, Champ Kelly. It's a move that he should have made, and he ultimately did make. And it's a good decision from him to start off this NFL trade deadline. What was your one-word reaction to Jaelan Phillips ultimately being traded? But this does give Miami 5 selections now in the top 100 of the draft, which is just absolutely massive, right? Think about it. This team has not a lot of young talent, not a lot of building blocks of the future. So what do you need to do to fast track a rebuild? You need a lot of darts to throw at the dartboard, and there is no more valued darts than top 100 selections. So Miami, going into this April's draft, currently has a 1st-round pick, their own. They have their own 2nd-round pick. Both of those project to be inside the top 50, a top 10 1st-round pick, unless they rattle off a ton of wins here, and a top 10 pick in the 2nd round as well. So Miami will have 2 selections inside the top 50 unless they win like 6 of the last 8 games. They will also have 3 3rd-round picks. They have their own 3rd-round pick. They now have the Eagles' 3rd-round pick, and I think this is very important for clarity's sakes. The Eagles had 2 third-round picks. They had the Jets, which obviously would be very valuable because it would just be the first probably 3 to 5 picks of the third round, and they had their own third-round pick. Now, this pick coming to Miami from Philadelphia is their own, so it is not the Jets. If they got the Jets, that would have been basically another second-rounder. And that would have been absolutely phenomenal. But instead, it's the Eagles' third-round pick, which is fine. And I mentioned they had 3 third-round picks. The other third-round pick is from the Houston Texans. And this is a trade that we can look back and say was one of Chris Grier's finest. Because last year in the 2025 NFL Draft, he traded a 4th-round pick to get a 2026 third from Houston. The Texans really wanted to move up. They trade back and get a third this year. And knowing Chris Grier, he probably would have drafted someone who was absolutely horrific in that 4th round. Instead, we get this new GM and new regime, a 3rd-round pick, now giving Miami 3 third-round selections. And they can either take someone in the 3rd round 3 times, or they can help package those numbers and trade up into the draft and get a second round pick maybe. Or you have 3rd-round picks to make some smart trades in the offseason. Either way, having more draft capital inside the top 100, very, very good. We got more coming up here in a second, but this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, and with the weather changing and it getting cold, well, the feeling of getting right on Prize Picks never gets old, and you can get $50 in lineup when you play your first $5 lineup. Now, when you think about Prize Picks, you think about the best daily fantasy sports. It's so easy to play. Just pick more or less at least 2 player stats, and well, if you get your picks right, you could cash in. They are one of the only apps that offers stacks, meaning you could pick the same player up to 3 times in the same lineup. Want to go more than on Devon Achane receptions, fantasy score, and longest reception? Well, now you can, all in the same lineup, only on Prize Picks. I played Prize Picks this past week. I took more on Rashee Rice receiving yards and more on Brian Thomas Jr. receiving yards. Unfortunately, Brian Thomas Jr. did not do his job, but you could join me in the millions on Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That link is in the description and comments of today's video. Now, before we transition into what could be next for the Miami Dolphins here, one last piece of news on the Jaelan Phillips trade. He is, or the Dolphins are going to be paying a portion of Phillips' salary the rest of the year to facilitate the trade. I don't think that's a big deal at all. Taking money to get a better pick is absolutely something Miami should do, especially because it is on a 1-year deal. Like if you traded Bradley Chubb, which we'll talk about that here in a second, and you took on most of his salary this year and beyond to get a better pick, well, that probably wouldn't be worth it because the pick would still probably be like a 5th-round selection. But if you had to pay, like, let's say, I don't know how much what it is, like $4 million of the remaining $10 million of Jaelan Phillips' contract this year, and you can upgrade that selection from a 4th to a 3rd, that's something Miami absolutely should be doing because they're not competing the rest of the year and it doesn't affect their salary cap situation going forward in 2026 and beyond. So that is the right decision by Champ Kelly in Miami to ultimately pay a portion of his salary. Heck, I wouldn't even care if they paid all of his salary, if we're going to be honest, because it's either you don't trade him and you pay it and he plays for you, or you rather swap that in for a pick in the future, which I would have absolutely done. So Jaelan Phillips reunites with Vic Fangio, and Miami trades their best asset. Obviously, the trade deadline for Miami, if it was a fire sale, players that have garnered interest, Jaelan Phillips, who just got traded to the Eagles, Bradley Chubb, Jaylen Wright, the running back potentially, Matthew Judon has reportedly been of interest, Minkah Fitzpatrick, and then the big name player was wide receiver Jaylen Waddle. And there has been conflicting reports on Jaylen Waddle's availability at the trade deadline. There has been reports from Ian Rappaport saying that Miami, for the first time with new GM Champ Kelly, is open to listening to offers, but it would take a offer that blows them out of the water to get Waddle traded away from Miami. Adam Schefter mentioned the same thing and tagged it as very, very unlikely. So if you were worried about a Jaylen Waddle trade, I do not think you have to be concerned whatsoever. The only way they trade him, it sounds like, is if they get a first-round pick and more. And I'm not sure anybody's going to offer that. And if I'll be honest, I think Miami should probably turn it down anyway, unless they get like a Tyreek Hill package. If they get what Miami traded the Chiefs for Tyreek Hill, then okay, let's have a different discussion. If you don't remember, Miami got a first, or gave up a first, a second, and more day 3 selections. Like if you could get a first and a second round pick plus a little bit of more for Jaylen Waddle, you should probably do it, even though it would break my heart. Guy's 26, a legit wide receiver 1, under contract for 3 more seasons at a reasonable price in this wide receiver market today. So I'm not trading him at all, really, unless you get offered a Godfather package. So we'll ultimately see there. We know Bradley Chubb could be traded. I don't think he ultimately gets dealt. It's always sounded like it would be either one of Jaelan Phillips or Bradley Chubb. And obviously with Phillips being dealt, I think Chubb sticks around. Miami's edge rusher room now is Matthew Judon, Bradley Chubb, Chop Robinson, Cam Good. They'll probably sign Quentin Bell from the practice squad to the 53-man. That would likely be my guess. We'll see what they do. We'll keep you updated on what they do, of course, but that is kind of what I would imagine the edge room looking like. And Bradley Chubb's contract just makes it more difficult to trade him. If you trade him, you have a $23.8 million dead cap hit for 2026 on Bradley Chubb. He has a $31.2 million cap hit projection right now. If you trade him or cut him post June 1st in the offseason, you save $20 million in cap and only have a $10 million cap hit for that dead spot. So I don't imagine Bradley Chubb being traded, because if you deal him away, you'd only really be getting a 5th round pick at best, likely a 6th round selection. So is it worth taking on all that dead money financially for that? No, probably not. And it's why I said Jaelan Phillips was the likely trade candidate that I think is the most likely to go, and I was just hoping you could get a 3rd round pick. I always said the projected value was a 3rd round pick, and then for Bradley Chubb, at its best would be a 5th round pick or a 6th round pick, and ultimately a 3rd round pick goes to Miami for Jaelan Phillips. We've heard Minkah Fitzpatrick's name kind of start to go a little bit around. I think he is very much on the table to be traded, under contract for next season, but if you can get a 3rd round pick for Minkah Fitzpatrick before the deadline tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern time, I think you trade him too, because he clearly never wanted to be here, and I don't think he wants to be here again, and he doesn't want to be on a losing football team and on a rebuilding team. And if you were able to cash in and get another 3rd round pick, that would give you 4 3rd round selections. It would give you 6 picks in the top 100, and it would just allow the next regime to really add a lot of young talent in the offseason and either make trades, draft picks, doesn't really matter. But you would have the ability, if you're able to hit on, let's say, 2 or 3 of those picks, you can really start to move forward and have a nice young nucleus. So if you could trade him for a 3rd, I think that would be the right decision. We'll have more later today. We'll have a video out tomorrow morning, and we'll be live for the NFL trade deadline as well. So subscribe. Appreciate everybody for watching, and we'll see you later with another video. Go Dolphins.